What happens when silence breaks and the truth finally speaks? In a world that teaches us to hide, a few brave men chose to shine. They risked fame, fortune, and everything they had, just to say, "This is me." Tell us in the comments, which story speaks to your truth? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every click helps their voices echo louder. Long before the world learned his truth, it learned his rhythm. Ricky Martin, the man who made the planet dance. When Living La Vida Loca hit in 1999, it wasn't just a song, it was an explosion. Latin music roared into the mainstream, and a new global superstar was born. Golden smile, shaking hips, pure electricity. He wasn't just a singer, he was a phenomenon. But behind the spotlight, behind the perfectly rehearsed moves and the roar of adoring crowds, Ricky Martin was living a quieter war. The kind fought behind closed doors, in mirrors, and in silence. Born in Puerto Rico in 1971, Ricky had been performing since he was 12. By the time he hit his 20s, he was already an international idol. His beauty was effortless, his charm magnetic, his voice intoxicating. But Hollywood and the Latin music industry shared one unspoken rule: don't be gay. For years, that rule became his cage. He smiled, flirted with female interviewers, played the part expected of him. The world saw a sex symbol. What it didn't see was a man suffocating behind a carefully crafted fantasy. Every headline, every tour, every camera flash, all of it louder than his truth. He once admitted, "Every night I went to bed with fear. Fear of losing everything if people knew who I really was." And yet, courage has a strange way of finding its moment. In March 2010, at the peak of his fame, Ricky Martin sat alone in front of a laptop and typed the words that would change his life forever. "I am a fortunate homosexual man. I am proud to be who I am." With one click, the silence broke. The world gasped, not because they didn't suspect, but because they finally heard it from him. The reaction was seismic. Some fans cheered, others turned away. Headlines exploded. But through the noise, one truth emerged. Ricky Martin wasn't just coming out, he was breaking through. In an industry that punished authenticity, his confession was an act of rebellion. He didn't hide behind PR statements or staged interviews. He spoke simply, vulnerably, humanly. And that simplicity made history. Since then, Ricky has become more than an artist. He's a father, a philanthropist, and a fighter for equality. He helped redefine masculinity in Latin culture, a world that once saw softness as weakness. His foundation, Ricky Martin Foundation, works to combat human trafficking and support vulnerable communities. His life became proof that visibility saves lives, that truth once spoken cannot be silenced again. He showed that being proud isn't arrogance, it's survival. And for millions of fans, especially in Latin America, where coming out can still cost you everything, Ricky Martin's words weren't just brave, they were liberating. Even after decades in the spotlight, he continues to challenge expectations, performing, raising his children, living openly, joyfully, without apology. Every stage he walks onto now isn't just a concert, it's a statement. Freedom looks like this. He once said, "I wish I could go back to my younger self and tell him, it's going to be okay. You're not broken, you're extraordinary." That line hit hearts across continents. Because for so many, Ricky Martin isn't just a musician. He's a mirror reflecting the possibility of self-acceptance. And maybe that's his greatest legacy. Not the awards, not the records, not the millions of screaming fans, but the quiet, personal revolutions he sparked in people who finally dared to be themselves. He turned the stage into a sanctuary, and the microphone into a weapon of truth. His rhythm made us move. His honesty made us feel. Tonight, as his music echoes in our memories and the crowd falls silent, one whisper remains, what millions of us already feel. Thank you, Ricky, for your courage, your truth, and your light. You didn't just change music, you changed what it means to be free. Before Neil Patrick Harris became America's sexiest man, he was Hollywood's favorite illusionist. A magician, a performer, a genius who could make you laugh, cry, and forget it was all just a show. Born in 1973 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Neil began acting before most kids could drive. By age 16, he was a household name as Doogie Howser, the teenage doctor who captured America's hearts. He wasn't just talented, he was extraordinary, a child prodigy in an adult world. But behind the applause, Neil lived a different kind of balanced life, not between the scenes, but between himself. In the 1990s, Hollywood was not a place for honesty. Every studio executive had the same unspoken rule. If you're gay, don't say it. Careers were ruined by petty things. The cameras loved Neil, but the world he lived in didn't love him for who he was. He dated women in public. He smiled on red carpets. He played a role. And deep down, like so many before him, he wondered, could truth and fame coexist? Then came How I Met Your Mother. As the legendary playboy Barney Stinson, Neil became America's Prince Charming, an irresistible playboy. Ironically, his greatest success came from portraying his true self. But instead of hiding behind it, Neil used it. He built a bridge between awareness and possibility. By 2006, he was sick of the secret. When People magazine reached out to ask, he didn't shy away. He replied, "I'm a very content gay man, living life to the fullest. No drama, no tearful confession, just the truth. Simple, confident, unapologetic." And that simplicity is powerful. Fans were shocked. The man who had been the most straight flirt on television had quietly rewritten the rules. But instead of a backlash, something magical happened. People loved him more. Because authenticity, it turns out, is the performance the world never gets tired of. After coming out, Neil's career didn't fade. It exploded. He hosted the Emmys, Tonys, and Oscars. He starred in Broadway musicals, dramas, comedies, and horror films. He sang, danced, and joked his way into history. The first openly gay man to host every major American awards show and win them. And along the way, he proudly brought his husband, actor David Burtka, to every red carpet. They weren't just icons, they were family. In 2014, they married in Italy and became parents to twins Harper and Gideon. To the public, it wasn't just a wedding, it was a cultural moment. A declaration that love can be ordinary, even when it's extraordinary. Neil never turned his identity into a brand. Instead, he turned it into permission, to let others see that you can be gay, smart, funny, successful, and loved by millions. He became living proof that you don't have to choose between being respected and being real. There's something poetic about a magician who builds his legacy on illusion, but changes the world with truth. Every time he steps on stage, whether it's under the Broadway spotlight or in his late-night monologues, he brings that quiet revolution with him. The performance never stops shining, it just becomes real. And maybe that's what courage really is. Not a shout, not a title, but a steady smile and the gentle words, "This is me." Neil Patrick Harris didn't just shatter stereotypes about gay artists. He redefined what it means to be sexy, family, and masculinity in American culture. Because in the end, magic isn't about illusion, it's about the courage to be seen without it. If the truth could strengthen his career instead of weaken it, imagine what it could do for yours. When the lights go out in the newsroom, there's a certain silence, the kind that only comes after chaos. Anderson Cooper has lived in that silence all his life, the calm after the storm, the voice after the fear, the truth after the noise. Born in 1967 to Gloria Vanderbilt, heiress, artist, and legend, Anderson grew up surrounded by the aura of American privilege. But behind that legacy is tragedy. His father died when Anderson was 10. His brother committed suicide at 23, right in front of their mother. And just like that, the boy born into privilege learned how fragile the world can be. So he ran toward the places most people run from: pain, danger, war, loss. He picked up a camera, boarded a plane, and began pursuing the places where truth lurks. From the famine in Somalia to the conflict in Bosnia, from the streets of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina to the front lines in Syria, Anderson Cooper was more than a reporter. He was a witness. But even as he stood amid the rubble of other people's worlds, he quietly concealed a part of himself. In an industry built on image, the silver-haired CNN anchor was the very definition of cool. The sharp suit, the calm voice, the unwavering blue eyes. For years, he dodged questions, dodged gossip, and focused on the story, never himself. He spoke the truth of the world, but not his own. Then, in 2012, Anderson Cooper did something no teleprompter could have prepared him for. He wrote a letter, not to a TV network or a glossy magazine, but to journalist Andrew Sullivan at the Daily Beast. In it, he wrote 12 simple words that changed journalism forever. The truth is, I am gay, always have been, and always will be. No fanfare, no drama, just the kind of clear, unflinching honesty he always demanded of others. Within hours, the letter spread worldwide. People weren't shocked he was gay. They were moved by how he said it, with quiet strength, integrity, and truth. In that moment, he didn't just come out, he embodied it. He shattered the stereotype of what a gay man in power looked like. He wasn't flamboyant, he wasn't political, he was the nation's most trusted journalist, and he happened to be gay. That simple truth, delivered with dignity, reshaped America's notions of masculinity, professionalism, and pride. Since then, Anderson Cooper has continued to do what he does best: tell the truth, no matter how dark. He has reported on mass shootings, wars, and hurricanes. He has cried on live TV. He has comforted strangers. He has let his empathy spill over onto the screen in a way few journalists dare. His sincerity doesn't stop with that letter. In 2020, he welcomed his first son, Wyatt, via surrogacy, becoming one of the first openly gay fathers on primetime American television. He later welcomed his second child. And in those moments, Anderson didn't just report history, he lived it. He once said, "I learned that the truth, no matter how painful, always heals." That belief became the backbone of his career and the heart of his legacy. For millions of viewers, Anderson Cooper was more than just a journalist. He was the calm in the chaos, the voice that calmed the storm. His presence reminded people that truth still has a place in a fractured world, and that courage doesn't always have to be shouting. Sometimes it's just standing in front of the camera and telling the story accurately. In every broadcast, every headline, every pause between words, he delivered the same message: that authenticity, in life, in love, in work, is not weakness. It's strength at its most human. And maybe that's why America trusted him, not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He didn't just break barriers in media, he redefined credibility itself, proving that truth knows no gender, no boundary, only courage. And in a world that too often mistakes noise for truth, Anderson Cooper reminds us that humanity remains the most powerful story ever told. Some stories begin with fame. Zachary Quinto's began with silence. He was born in 1977 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a quiet kid who spent his childhood sketching superheroes and dreaming of galaxies far beyond his neighborhood. He would later find those galaxies as Spock in Star Trek, but first he had to survive the universe inside his own head. His angular face, sharp voice, and haunting eyes made him perfect for complex men: the genius, the villain, the alien, the misunderstood. In Heroes, he played the chilling Sylar, a man who could steal others' powers. In Star Trek, he resurrected one of pop culture's most logical minds. The irony? Behind the camera, Zachary Quinto was hiding his most human truth. He'd built a career portraying outsiders and was living as one. In an industry obsessed with labels, his silence wasn't cowardice. It was protection. He knew the game. A leading man could be mysterious, dark, even dangerous, but never gay. And then, in 2011, something happened that broke through his careful control. A 14-year-old boy named Jamie Rodemeyer, who had been bullied for being gay, took his own life. Zachary read about it. He sat still for a long time. Then he said to himself, "No more." Days later, he wrote on his blog, "It is my intention to live an authentic life of compassion and integrity and action." And with that sentence, he shattered the silence. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't stage a reveal. He simply told the truth and let it echo. That moment wasn't about celebrity. It was about humanity. Zachary Quinto wasn't coming out to gain attention. He was coming out to save someone, anyone, who might be standing where that young boy once stood, feeling unseen, unheard, unloved. The world's response was electric. Fans flooded social media. Fellow actors praised his courage. But more importantly, kids, scared, isolated, hopeful, finally saw someone who looked strong, smart, and unapologetically gay. He became a new kind of role model. Not the perfect hero, but the honest one. In interviews, he spoke quietly but firmly about empathy, equality, and grief. He reminded people that being gay isn't just about attraction, it's about truth. A truth that demands both peace and fight. On screen, he continued to play characters that challenged the idea of masculinity. In The Boys in the Band, he embodied the pain and pride of a generation forced to perform strength just to survive. Off-screen, he became an advocate for mental health and LGBTQ+ youth, especially those navigating the same silence he once endured. He once said, "Coming out doesn't end the story, it begins it." And he's lived by that promise ever since. In a Hollywood that often rewards conformity, Zachary stands as proof that authenticity can be more powerful than any special effect. His career didn't just survive honesty, it thrived because of it. Every time he walks a red carpet, every time he gives a measured, thoughtful interview, he carries that same quiet rebellion. The belief that identity isn't something you hide or perform, it's something you honor. He taught us that courage doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it looks like living another day as yourself, without apology, without disguise. And maybe that's the message for all of us, especially for the young ones watching from small towns, from dorm rooms, from places where being different still feels dangerous. Your truth isn't too heavy to carry. It's your armor. And when you finally wear it, the world becomes a little safer. Not just for you, but for everyone who's still afraid to shine. In the late 90s, there was no escaping it. 5 boys, 1 dream, and 1 sound to rule the world. They were NSYNC, and every stage they stepped onto was a phenomenon. Tight choreography, perfect harmonies, and ear-splitting screams. And in the midst of all that chaos, Lance Bass appeared, a quiet, sweet man with a smile that could melt millions. To the world, Lance was living the dream. Fame, fortune, fans. But behind that dream was a nightmare only he could feel. The constant fear that the truth about who he really was could end it all. Born in Mississippi in 1979, Lance grew up in a deeply religious southern town. He loved music, space, and the idea of making people happy. But as NSYNC became a global phenomenon, happiness came with a script. Be perfect. Be straight. Be what they wanted. At the height of boy band craze, pop stars weren't just singers, they were fantasies. Every lyric, every poster, every wink had to tell a story. And in that story, there was no room for being gay. I thought if anyone knew, it would all fall apart. The band, the fans, my family, he once admitted. So he buried the truth deep, behind platinum records and forced smiles. Night after night, He played to sold-out stadiums, fans chanting his name, and he never felt more invisible. When NSYNC broke up in 2002, the spotlight faded, but the fear remained. He spent years trying to live a life that wasn't his, forcing himself into relationships that weren't right for him, chasing a happiness that never came. And then one day, something inside him snapped, not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. In 2006, Lance Bass decided to stop running. He came out to People magazine, simply saying, "I'm gay, and I finally accepted it." Those words echoed through pop culture like a drumbeat. The handsome boy band star loved by millions had come out. The reaction was a mix of shock, praise, and revelation. Fans who once dreamed of marrying him now thanked him for giving them the courage to be themselves. Lance didn't just come out. He stepped forward. He used his platform to advocate for LGBTQ+ representation in music, produce documentaries, and speak out about mental health, gender identity, and acceptance. He reminded people that pop music isn't just about catchy tunes, it's about human stories. In 2014, he married Michael Turchin in a beautiful ceremony broadcast on national television, a moment that once seemed impossible. Then, in 2021, they welcomed twins via surrogacy, completing a once-forbidden love story. Today, Lance Bass is more than just a former boy band star. He's a father, a husband, and a symbol of what happens when truth triumphs over fear. He transformed from teen idol to cultural icon, proving that growing up doesn't mean giving up on your dreams, it means rewriting them. He once said, "Coming out didn't end my career, it started my life." And perhaps that's why his story resonates so deeply today. Because in a world still obsessed with image, Lance Bass reminds us that authenticity is the only thing that never goes out of style. He showed a generation that you can be a pop legend and a proud gay man, that music and love belong to everyone, not just the stories we're taught to believe. So if you've ever danced to Bye Bye Bye, or whispered your truth in the dark in the hope that someone would still love you, know this: you were brave. And if this story resonates with you, let it resonate. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Before he had the confidence to tell the truth, Rupert Everett told the truth. And for a time, it nearly killed him. Born in Norfolk, England, Rupert came from a classic aristocratic family, a Catholic upbringing, boarding school, and a voice that could cut through velvet. When he arrived in London, he was glamorous, tall, impossibly handsome, and dangerously intelligent. He was more than just an actor. He was Rupert Everett, the kind of guy who never walked into a room. He was the one who controlled everything. In the early 1980s, Britain was in a panic. AIDS was on the rise, the tabloids were ruthless, Hollywood was worse. But Everett didn't care about rules. When he came out in another country, playing a young gay student in a repressive British boarding school, he wasn't just acting, he was projecting his soul. And then he did the unthinkable. He came out, openly, proudly, long before the world was ready to listen. It was a time when coming out in showbiz wasn't brave, it was career suicide. Managers warned him, studios closed, roles disappeared. Overnight, the most promising British actor of his generation became too complicated for Hollywood. Years later, he bitterly said, "People told me I'd never play a romantic lead again. They were right." He dared to speak his truth in an industry that demanded fantasy, and the industry punished him for it. But Rupert Everett was never meant to disappear quietly. He turned exile into reinvention. He wrote, he directed, he mocked the system that rejected him. His memoirs, sharp, funny, brutally honest, became bestsellers. And when he returned to Hollywood, he did it on his own terms. In 1997, the world fell in love with him again in My Best Friend's Wedding. As Julia Roberts' gay confidant, he stole every frame, charming, elegant, and effortlessly charismatic. It was poetic, the once silent Hollywood man now its most memorable and witty voice. But Rupert never let success diminish his authenticity. In interviews, he remained fierce. He talked about how the industry still treats gay people as symbols, about how progress is slower than it seems, and about how authenticity often comes with scars. He never played the victim, but he refused to lie about the cost of being authentic. He once said, "Coming out ruined my Hollywood career, but it gave me a life." And that says it all, because Rupert Everett was no longer chasing fame, he was chasing freedom. In his later years, he returned to the stage, Shakespeare, Wilde, the works that had shaped him, performing with the weight of a man who had lived every line. When he played Oscar Wilde in The Happy Prince, it wasn't acting, it was prophecy. A gay man, outcast from society, finding dignity in the truth. Everett was Wilde, resurrected and redeemed. And perhaps that is the legacy that Rupert Everett leaves behind. Not a legacy of superstardom, but of survival. The courage to live when the world turns its back. The will to be seen when the spotlight burns bright. Because before Neil Patrick Harris hosted the Oscars, before Anderson Cooper read the news, before Zachary Quinto took the Enterprise to the stars, Rupert Everett stood alone and said, "This is me." He was punished for it, but because he spoke up, others found the courage to speak louder. Rupert Everett was ahead of his time, and in its slow, inevitable way, history finally caught up. His story isn't just about fame or loss. It's about what happens when truth refuses to stay quiet. So now, maybe it's our turn to ask, what does courage look like when no one is watching? Tell us in the comments, which of these stories touched you most, and what truth do you carry quietly within you? If Rupert's journey moved you, take a second to like, share, or subscribe, because every time we honor their voices, we make space for a braver, kinder world. Born in 1973 to Puerto Rican parents in Brooklyn, New York, Wilson grew up between two worlds, Latin at home, American outside, and never really having enough of either. His family's love was genuine, but so was their faith, and for a boy discovering he was gay, those two truths often collided like storms in his chest. When he told his parents he was gay at 19, his father kicked him out of the house. He had nowhere to go, nothing to say, except the belief that he deserved to exist. So he packed his bags, and with a heart full of fear and defiance, he started again. In 1994, while most of Hollywood was still shying away from gay stories, a small TV series dared to show something real. It was called My So-Called Life. And in it, Wilson Cruz became the first openly gay Latino actor on American television. His character, Ricky Vasquez, wasn't a stereotype. He was a soul, sensitive, fierce, lost, beautiful. He wore eyeliner and pain in equal measure, and through him, a generation of gay teens finally saw themselves, not as jokes, but as people. Behind the scenes, the reality was harsher. Wilson was still homeless, still trying to mend his relationship with his father. Fame hasn't made his life easier, it's exposed his truth. But he keeps going because he understands what most actors never have to learn, that expressing yourself isn't just art, it's survival. Hollywood wasn't ready for him. The Latino community wasn't ready for him either, but Wilson didn't wait for permission. He went on to star in Party of Five, Star Trek Discovery, and countless other projects, where he has a mission to make sure no kid feels as alone as he did. When people ask why he never stops talking about being gay and Latino, he answers simply, "Because I remember what it was like when no one spoke for me." That's why his story resonates more than most. It's not just about identity. It's also about presence as an act of defiance, about standing up when you've been knocked down. In Star Trek Discovery, He became the first openly gay man to play a recurring gay role in the Star Trek universe, a franchise built on exploring new worlds. But the truth is, Wilson didn't have to travel galaxies to find courage. He carried it with him all the way. He turned pain into purpose, denial into representation, and silence into something louder than applause: change. Today, Wilson Cruz is more than just an actor. He's a mentor, an activist, and a reminder that progress isn't measured by how fast the world changes, but by how hard we fight when it doesn't. He travels the country speaking to LGBTQ+ youth, to children of color, to anyone who has ever been told, "You don't belong here." He tells them what no one told him. You're not too much. You're not broken. You're exactly what the world needs. He once said, "I play characters who love deeply because I didn't grow up with it. Now I want other people to see it and know that it's possible." Wilson's life is proof that courage doesn't always come with praise. Sometimes it comes with loneliness. But if you can endure it long enough, that loneliness becomes a legacy. And perhaps that's what he left us with. A legacy built not on fame, but on faith. Not the kind that comes from religion, but the kind that comes from resilience. Because as the credits roll, Wilson Cruz represents every kid who ever whispered, "Would they still love me if they knew?" To them, his answer is clear. Yes, they will. And even if they don't, love yourself enough to keep going. Because one day, your truth might be the reason someone finally believes they're worth living. Every movement has its heroes and its heretics. James Dreyfus, the British actor with the sharp wit and fearless tongue, has always been both. Born in 1968 in London, Dreyfus came of age in a country that still whispered about what it meant to be gay. But he never whispered back. He spoke, with humor, with intelligence, with an unapologetic honesty that could slice through silence like a scalpel. From the moment he appeared on television in the early 90s, James was unmistakable. His timing was surgical, his characters outrageous, and his comedic brilliance undeniable. Shows like The Thin Blue Line and Gimme 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 didn't just make people laugh, they made them look. In an era when gay characters were either invisible or the butt of every joke, Dreyfus turned stereotypes into spotlights. His roles were flamboyant, yes, but they were also free. They carried a kind of defiance, a wink to the audience that said, "You can laugh with me, but you will see me." Off-screen, he was just as unfiltered. He came out at the start of his career, long before it was fashionable or safe to do so, and he refused to let anyone define what being gay should look like. But as decades passed and society changed, something rare happened. James Dreyfus didn't stop questioning. He didn't just fight homophobia, he fought conformity, even within the movement that had once saved him. He became known not just as an actor, but as a provocateur, a man unafraid to challenge dogma, whether it came from Hollywood, politics, or his own community. He spoke about the importance of free speech, about the danger of silencing voices even when they're uncomfortable. Some praised him, others criticized him, but no one could ignore him. Because Dreyfus understood something most people forget. Progress isn't agreement, it's dialogue. And freedom, real freedom, means defending the right to speak, even when it's messy, perhaps even when it's hard. He often reminded people, if we can't talk to each other, then what did we fight for? That question haunted interviewers, enraged trolls, and inspired thinkers. Behind the laughter, behind the headlines, what makes James Dreyfus truly remarkable isn't controversy, it's conviction. The courage to stand alone, not just as a gay man in a straight world, but as an independent mind in a world obsessed with sides. He's proof that courage isn't a one-time act, it's a lifetime commitment. It's telling the truth even when the applause fades, even when the spotlight moves on. While others sought comfort in acceptance, Dreyfus sought honesty. While others fit into movements, he chose to question them. And in doing so, he reminded us that being authentic doesn't always mean being agreeable. It means being real. Today, in a world that often trades nuance for noise, James stands as a reminder that bravery doesn't always look like what we expect. It doesn't always come wrapped in a flag or followed by a standing ovation. Sometimes it's quieter, more complex, more human. He has lived his truth not as a brand, but as a challenge to think deeper, to listen longer, to fight not just for visibility, but for integrity. Because at its core, the movement he helped shape, the movement all these 10 men have carried, isn't just about being seen, it's about being whole. And maybe that's what makes James Dreyfus the perfect closing note in this story. The reminder that courage has many forms, and that every voice, even the controversial one, keeps the conversation alive. They turned fear into freedom and silence into song. Their stories remind us that truth is not a risk, it's a revolution. If their journeys touched your heart, let it show. Focal. Comment below which story moved you most, hit like, share this video, and subscribe. Because every time we celebrate their courage, we make the world a little braver, a little kinder, and a lot more real.